KOCT program underwriters are not affiliated with the City of Oceanside. This program is underwritten in part by Waste Management of North County in Oceanside. We are dedicated to serving customers and community as a safe, comprehensive service provider, a good corporate citizen, and a responsible environmental steward. Think green. Think Waste Management. You are watching KOCT's North County Roundtable. On today's show, we have candidates for the 49th Congressional District.
Welcome to KOCT's North County Roundtable. I'm your host, Alison St. John, and on this special June primary edition of North County Roundtable, we'll be speaking with most of the candidates for the 49th Congressional District here in California that's being vacated by Congressman Darrell Issa. All of the candidates were invited to this program, all 16 of them, but not all of them are participating. Tonight's forum will begin with brief 30-second self-introductions, followed by question and answers. We've asked our candidates to keep their responses in this first half hour to 1 minute so that we can get in as many questions as possible. We'll take a brief break at the halfway point, followed by more questions. Those will have 30-second responses and brief closing statements. Please note, if one candidate is directly challenged by another, we'll give that candidate challenged 15 seconds at the end of the round to have a chance to respond if they want to. The candidates have been seated in alphabetical order, and we'll start with a different candidate with each new question. So with the formal explained, let's get started with the candidates' brief 30-second self-introductions. And we'll start with you, Doug Applegate.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Doug Applegate. I've lived in 49th since I got here from Okinawa with the Marine Corps in 1981. I'm a 4-decade trial attorney. I've been an infantry officer and a judge advocate in the Marine Corps with 32 years active reserve service. I've been running for the 49th for 3 years now with 3 key points: single-payer health care, expanded public education preschool through at least 16 years apprenticeship or a public university, and most importantly, 100% renewables within 10 years. It is definitely doable. That's what Deloitte is telling major corporations. But most importantly right now is getting Congress to vote on the use of military force. They're required under the Constitution. It's their duty. They should do it.
Thank you. Rocky Chavez.
Well, hello, Oceanside. And by the way, all of you, welcome to my city of Oceanside in KOCT. As KOCT and the audience know, I've been here for over 20 years. In fact, I actually was on the board of KOCT. I've been on the show over 100 times, as a city council member here for 2 terms, as the Undersecretary and later Acting Secretary for the California Department of Veteran Affairs, talking about taking care of our veterans. And now as your state assembly member, talking about education and other things. I look forward to talking about the important issues of our country.
Thank you. Now we have Josh Hancock.
Hello, my name is Josh Hancock. Thank you, KOCT, for inviting me here. I'm a conservative libertarian. I'm a Marine veteran and Eagle Scout. I'm a Oceanside resident for over 20 years. I'm about limited government. I'm just a regular person trying to make a difference, and I hope you consider me for your representative.
Thank you very much, Josh. Paul Kerr.
Allison, I want to thank you for having us on tonight, as I believe this is a critical time for our country. Americans lack access to quality health care. The cost of housing and education are out of control. Wages are not keeping up. Our immigrants and our labor organizations are under attack. Look, Americans are struggling, and I've lived many, if not most of those same struggles. I very much look forward to our conversation tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mike Levin.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, and thanks for everyone watching. I'm a clean energy advocate and environmental attorney with over a decade of experience working across the aisle, both at the state and federal level, getting things done to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, improve the energy efficiency of our buildings, deploy more electric vehicles, and I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done in California, and I know we can do it across the country. I'm also a bold progressive who will stand up for a living wage, Medicare for all, and social justice. And to those Republicans on stage here tonight with me, I ask, are you with Trump or are you with California? Because there is no middle ground.
Thank you. Brian Maryott.
Good evening. Thank you, Allison. A pleasure to be here. So I just wrapped up a 25-year career in the business world. My wife and our 3 children reside in San Juan Capistrano, where I've been on the council since 2016. I currently serve as mayor pro tem. I'm motivated to run this year because I think we have a sad level of partisanship that is getting in the way of very, very important and critical issues to all Americans, and particular folks here in District 49. So I'm grateful to be here and have the opportunity to be with others running and enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Craig Nordahl.
Thank you, Allison. I've lived here in this district for 29 years, raised my children and my family here. I have a real estate business that I've grown from scratch, and I know the district as well as anyone here. I've been called a conservative activist, and today I was reminded of the main reason that I jumped into this race. If you go to the San Diego County Register of Voters, you'll see I was the very first candidate to file my paperwork on February 12th out of all the candidates. Today I got an email that said Arizona puts God back into the conversation. Arizona passed legislation putting "In God We Trust" and other mottos of that type into their public schools. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a spiritual battle in this country. We need a godly man to take this position and to lead this country back to the godly morals that this country was founded on. This country was founded for freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. I ask that you look at my website, Nordahl for Congress, and see all the issues in videos.
Thank you, Craig. Robert Pendleton.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Robert Pendleton. I'm an ophthalmologist, a small business owner, a biochemist, and a moderate candidate for Congress. Only socially progressive, fiscally conservative moderates can truly claim to have the political platform and moral authority to put an end to bipartisan congressional gridlock. Donkeys and elephants have failed. Please visit pendletonforcongress.org and k9usa.org for more information on my platform.
Thank you. And we have Mike Schmidt.
Hello, thank you. My name is Dr. Mike Schmidt. I'm a candidate here in the 49th. I'm a resident of Dana Point. I'm a full-time healthcare practitioner. I'm a small business owner. I've also been an envoy, a congressional envoy to the Middle East. I consider myself a lay expert on the Middle East. I value statesmanship. I feel I can bring the statesmanship necessary to work on both sides of the Congress. Healthcare is the #1 issue. It drives all of our debt problems, which is the #1 issue we have.
Thank you. Joshua Schoonover.
Thank you, Allison, and thanks to the viewers at home for tuning in. I'm a patent attorney. I believe in individual freedom, personal accountability, low taxes, a small government, and a very strong military. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking on the issues tonight.
And finally, we have Danielle St. John.
Hello, my name is Danielle St. John. I am a product of this district. I was born here. I was born in San Diego and spent most of my life in North County. I am not a politician, and I, at this point, as a lifelong Democrat, recently Dem-exited, I really feel our only choice now is to not go right or left, but to go above all of this nonsense and to take our country back with real people.
Okay, thank you. So let's get started on the issues, shall we? And I want to start with a question about our President Donald Trump. Everyone in this circle will have a chance to start, but the first person for this question is Mr. Doug Applegate. And I want to ask you whether you believe that President Trump is making America great again, and do you agree with his policies? Which ones do you agree and not agree with?
Well, it's hard to find any policies that I agree with the president on at all. I definitely think that he is creating a national security risk both on the Korean Peninsula as well as in the Middle East. General James Mattis begged him to go to Congress to ask for congressional authority to make the strikes. in Syria over the alleged gas attack, and that those strikes did nothing to alleviate the ability of Assad to deliver any type of chemical weapons. On an economic level, our debt is going to be threatened by his tax plan, and that is also a national security issue. So I can state categorically that he's unfit for command.
Okay, I'll restate the question if you need it, but if you feel confident that you got the question, just go ahead. Basically, this one is about Trump. Do you disagree with any of his policies, Rocky Chavez?
Well, there's a lot of things about Trump that I think about. Let me tell you what I think has happened well. I think the Supreme Court nominee was a good decision. I noticed this week, actually, his nominee went against one of his positions, so I'm sure he's getting ready to tweet about that. I think the funding of the military is critical. We know that we have not been funding the military, and the equipment readiness has gone down significantly. That's why we had so many accidents with our ships and with our planes, and that's an important thing. Reducing regulations. You know, regulations in government and bureaucracy can suck energy out of the economy, and the reduction of them is a good thing. I also think giving education back to the states and their responsibility is a good thing. It's not the federal responsibility. Actually, in California, Governor Brown agrees with that in local control funding to allow the states to do education. Things I'm concerned about with Trump is the debt. That is a real problem we have to go through, and I hope he deals with it.
Thank you. So, Josh, where do you stand on our president?
Overall, I say Donald Trump's doing a good job. He is trying to do, in his own way, make America great again. However, I disagree because America's already great. Right now, the jobs are good. We're having more jobs than we have in a while. The economy's doing well, but our national debt's over $21.1 trillion, and with a $740 billion a year deficit, it's only going to increase. And also the interest on the national debt's around $350 billion a year, so it's only going to get higher. That's our 5th largest expenditures, interest on the national debt.
Okay, thank you. Paul, your position on President Trump?
Allison, this is the most divisive president in our history, and he's done a number of things that I'm not comfortable with, the Muslim ban, among others, the tax scam, whereby he basically passed a tax reform that transferred $1.4 trillion, if his numbers are accurate, into the hands of the wealthy, uber wealthy, and major corporations. But the issue that I'm most having the hardest time with, of course, is the health care. He is hell-bent on destroying our health care system in this country, and that's a critical component in our national fabric. I stand strongly for Medicare for all. I think it's a critical piece of the puzzle, and obviously the debt is a problem as well, but the number one issue for me personally is the health care and the resolution of that problem.
Mike Levin.
Well, I believe that Donald Trump is the least qualified and least honest president that our nation has ever seen. And a big reason that I'm running for Congress is that I believe that he does present a threat to our democratic institutions. And he has, unfortunately, brought a toxic narrative to our politics and our discourse. And I hope that we can recover. I hope whoever the next representative is from the 49th District can move beyond that and begin to work across the aisle in productive ways rather than tearing people down via tweet or via speech. I feel we deserve far better and that America is already great, and what makes us great is that we have respect and appreciation for people, regardless of their country of origin, their race, their religion, their gender identity. It's that appreciation for our differences that make us strong. We do not need to divide on those differences to score short-term political points. That's what I see from this president and his toxic rhetoric. And I know San Diegans are better than that. I know the residents of this district are better than that, and we're going to show them this November.
Brian Maryott.
Thank you, Allison. So I agree that the country is already great. I think our president has worked to keep America in the lead. Since the early 90s, when the Soviet Union came apart, China's made it their pledge and their overall strategy to overtake us economically, and of course that would someday be militarily as well. And I think it's important that the United States, who showed the world how to do this, how to build an amazing country. They can do it our way, but we're not obligated to move to the sideline and wait for them to catch up. The Paris Accord is an example of this, and other things. Climate change is a planetary issue. There's countries in developing countries that are planning hundreds of coal plants that aren't even using the word clean in there. So I think reapproaching the Paris Accord is helpful. I think the foreign policy moves, for the most part, have been excellent to date. I think 10 years from now, Kim Jong-un will not be running North Korea, and we'll look back to this time where the seeds were planted by this president. Also in the economy, what we've done with the tax reform bill is critical for middle-class families, for our retired and elderly families, and obviously for our employers, small, medium, and large, to finally have a robust job market.
Craig Nordell.
Thank you. Let me make this perfectly clear to quote another president. Ladies and gentlemen, his favorite saying is, "Let's make America great again." I am 200% behind this president. I have stolen his motto, and I'd say, let's make America godly again. The most important thing this president has done, and if anybody at this table doesn't understand this, I don't think they should be in this seat. He named Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, ladies and gentlemen, moving the embassy there. It is a prophetic moment in the history of this world. Secondly, he signed an executive order that removed the penalty for the Johnson Amendment. The Johnson Amendment silenced the Christian church from talking about politics, ladies and gentlemen. If I am elected, I will help this president to make that a permanent legislative act to get rid of the Johnson Act forever. Talking about Korea, since the war of Korea, ladies and gentlemen, do you know we're still actually in war? It has never ended. And this is the first president to be able to sit down with the leader of North Korea, and he is going to make a difference here, ladies and gentlemen. It is phenomenal what he has done in North Korea.
Thank you. Robert Pendleton.
President Trump is scary. He's morally corrupt, and he has dictatorial tendencies. He's also threatening our environment and our coastline. The Ballotpedia estimates that 700 bills passed through the Congress in the past year. Only 38 of those bills actually affected every American, and fully 1/3 of them were just to fund the government. The government is stuck in bipartisan gridlock, and President Trump is fanning the flames of partisanship. I don't know a single person who would want their son to grow up as President Trump. President Trump is a moral failure for our country. Even if you agree with everything that he's doing, he's not a good president.
Okay, your position on President Trump, Mike Schmidt.
Yes. Well, I don't agree with my wife of 32 years every time, so I'm not going to agree with the president on everything. So number one thing that I don't agree with that really disturbed me was this bloated budget that was signed. It's the number one problem we have is overspending. I want to get to Congress so that I can work across the aisle and encourage a reform of health care. If we don't control the costs of our health care, our country is going to lose our power militarily. We're going to lose our ability to take care of our veterans. We're going to lose our ability to educate our kids. This has to be done. I would also point out, on the positive side, he doesn't get a lot of credit for the empowerment zones in the tax bill that are going to supercharge the low-income and minority areas. He doesn't get a lot of credit for some of the executive orders. I remember on December 21st, just before Christmas, he passed 36 indictments on human trafficking. As a person who's gone and involved myself in rescuing Yazidi girls from Mosul, that's something that's important in my heart.
Mike Schoonover.
Josh Schoonover. Thank you. You know, I really like Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. As a negotiator and a businessman, he's used to punching his opponent in the nose, figuratively, and letting the cards fall where they may. Then he allows both sides to sort of negotiate, and he usually wins on his positions. I think he's done an excellent job in North Korea. They're talking disarmament of nuclear weapons over there. He's done an excellent job in China on trade negotiations. I fully support his national security strategy. I support President Trump's budget, and I think he's doing a great job with border security. So I support President Trump.
And Danielle St. John.
Well, I really don't think that any billionaire can truly represent the people. So that is, you know, obviously I was a Bernie person and then a Jill Stein supporter at the end. So that's really like, you know, to start off, I really don't believe that any billionaire can represent the majority of the people. You know, he has no idea of the struggles that normal people face. He is above it in a way, and his whole class of people. I don't want to say that as a, you know, I know that we are the United States, so there is no class system supposedly in this country, but there is. And by overlooking that, really does a big disservice to the country. Now, some things that I think he is doing well is the human trafficking arrests. Honestly, I believe that especially in this district, we are, you know, we're a border city here in San Diego, and human trafficking is a huge problem. There have also been 2,000 resignations of note since he's taken office in political office or big CEOs, things like head of major companies. So is it possible that he really is draining the swamp? You know, I think that remains to be seen. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Okay, so let's now shift and talk about immigration. And the first person to answer this question will be Rocky Chavez. So I want to ask you, do you support the plan to expand the border wall, and how would you reform immigration if you were elected?
I'm really glad you asked that. That's one of my talking points. In 2014, I led the effort in the California Assembly among the Republicans to send a clear message to Congress to push immigration reform. Now, there was 28 members of the Assembly then, the Republican caucus, and I was able to get 17 of them to sign up to that. That's called leadership, taking something that's been so polarized that we need to understand that immigrants add vitality to our society. We need to protect them. Now, the issue of the border wall. Every country has a right to protect their borders. I think there's a lot of ways to do it without running a large wall between two countries. And as I've said many times, I'd rather open up pathways between Mexico and Canada to the United States, because the three of us can be the vibrant economy of the world to bring new ideas together.
Looks like you have a few seconds left. You want to comment on DACA?
Well, DACA, as I've said many, many times, I'm a strong supporter of DACA. Young kids that have come here at no fault of their own, who we have educated and have been, if you look at them, quite outstanding young people. We'll be a much better country to allow citizenship for these young children.
Okay, thank you. Josh Hancock.
All right. I believe we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to make it easier for people to come here, because America is great and people want to come here. However, we do need to build the wall. We don't want bad people coming here, because it's really easy for them to come across the border as it is right now. And a border wall would cost $21 billion. And people who are in the country illegally are costing us $128 billion, and that's after the taxes they've already paid into the system and don't get back. So we need to have immigration reform. We need to make those people here legally, and so they can pay into the system and get it back. And for DACA, we should put educated people who want to educate themselves, make themselves better. We should move them to the head of the line and help them become citizens.
Okay, thank you. So Paul Kerr, your position on the wall and immigration.
Allison, I was 12 years old and living in a small rural farming town in Arizona when I got my first job, picking onions with migrant farm workers. The lessons I learned in this small town have lasted a lifetime, and basically the most important was this. The men and women who have sacrificed everything to come to our country are looking for one thing: a better life for their children. As a legislation before Congress, I will not support Donald Trump's ego wall. I will support providing funds as necessary to Border Patrol to secure our borders. We need comprehensive legislation, comprehensive immigration legislation that includes DACA, but also includes the kind of reform that will bring workers out of the shadows, the kind of reform that will keep families together rather than ripping them apart, the kind of reform that will provide an ultimate path for citizenship. That's what I stand for.
Thank you. Mike Levin.
Well, we need a clean DREAM Act and comprehensive immigration reform. This is an incredibly personal issue to me. You wouldn't know it from looking at me or from my last name, but my grandparents on my mom's side came from Mexico. My grandpa was only 11 years old, my grandma was 3 years old, and they came and they worked incredibly hard. They didn't speak English, they didn't have any money. Ultimately, they worked and they created a small business that thrived. They had 5 daughters, all of whom went to college, 3 got advanced degrees. And they believed that if you work hard and play by the rules in this country, you can succeed. And that's what made our country great and our state great. When you look at our economy and our cultural fabric in the state of California, immigration strengthens us. And nothing frustrates me more than when I see some of the Republicans on this stage and others who aren't here tonight, when they use immigration as a wedge to try to divide. When they want to build a wall literally and figuratively, that is un-American.
Thank you. And so, Brian Maryott, where do you stand on immigration?
Thank you, Allison. So comprehensive immigration reform I've been hearing about since the 1980s. And I've called our immigration policy disingenuous and chaotic. It's disingenuous because we have allowed people to be in the country illegally, and we've hired them as businesses. We've looked the other way, and nobody's willing to have an honest conversation about what the labor rates would be if we didn't have illegal immigrants here, and our willingness to pay them. And that's just part of the disingenuous nature. It is chaotic because we can't manage our southern border and we're not enforcing the laws on the books. We have to do what's necessary to manage our southern border because the demand is so tremendous from countries from South America, which is unfortunate. They're beautiful countries full of wonderful people, but for a variety of reasons they feel like they'd rather be here or they need to be here, and you can't blame them for that. Real leadership is not showy, it's getting something done and reformed and executed on. And we need consistent bravery amongst legislators. We need to manage the southern border, which probably means an extension of security fencing or wall of some kind, and then we can get about some real reform.
Okay. So the wall and immigration, Craig Nordell.
Thank you. One of my favorite topics that I think across the country and in California, probably the hottest topic. One of my mottos is build the wall, vote Nordall. So that'll tell you where I stand. Ladies and gentlemen, if you talk to anyone who works down there and anyone who's been on the border, the danger is unbelievable. If you're really for these families that are immigrating, my grandfather immigrated from Norway, homesteaded land here. Everybody wants that American dream and immigration. It's got to be done legally, people. We have human trafficking. 70 to 80% of the women brought across this border are being sexually abused. Do you think that's a price that they should be paying for freedom here? I don't think so. They'd be better off staying in their country and with a new program helping them to get into this country faster and more efficiently. That's what we need to do, folks. We have guns coming across the border. We have terrorists coming across the border. I've been down there many times. I've taken a Republican group with 2 busloads with Jim Gilchrist in 2005, and we saw firsthand what's happening down there. We need to protect our border, both for the immigrants and for this country.
So Robert Pendleton, do you believe the wall is an effective way to deal with immigration?
Well, first of all, I believe in a merit-based system of immigration. Let's have a conversation as a nation and decide which citizens we need the most and encourage those people to come in. If we need engineers and chemists, those are the people we invite. If we need more farm workers, then farm workers get priority. Let's build a stronger nation by giving priority to productive citizens that we need the most. Immigration should be based on merit, not birth. And as for the wall, we already have walls erected in strategic locations along the border, and spending billions of dollars on a bigger, stronger wall is pointless when technological innovations like drones could achieve the same at a much lower expense. Removing economic incentives like sanctuary cities will do more to curb illegal immigration than a physical wall at a much lower cost. I would prefer to see more investment in feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, and protecting the environment than building a bigger wall.
So immigration is such a controversial topic. How would you break through this issue, Mike?
Well, the greatest challenge is to give about a 2-hour speech in 1 minute. So I have more positions and deeper positions on immigration, on my website, MikeSchmidtForCongress.com. I think it's more than everyone up here. I've actually laid out a very specific plan to bring the people out of the shadows, solve the magnets and get rid of the magnets that are drawing people here, which is a black market in the labor market. And the secondary one is we can build a wall 10 miles high, 42%, according to immigration studies, 42% of all undocumented people here fly in. And so it doesn't matter how big we build the wall if we don't solve the problems with it. Like Dr. Pendleton, I agree with the merit-based system, and it's all laid out on my website. The other big issue, we do need a physical border security. One of the things that has skyrocketed is the importation of heroin and fentanyl. It's one of the major problems in this district is opioid addiction.
Thank you. Joshua.
Yes, you know, politicians are going to tell you what we need, and they're going to try to gather an emotional response and hope that translates into your vote. But let me be different. I'm not a politician. I'm going to tell you how we solve this problem. It's really two things. It's containing the problem, and it's a remedy. As far as containing the problem, we need a wall, but what we really need is a deterrent. We can only deter those who wish to come here illegally by enforcing our laws and spreading the word to other people around the globe that the United States is a nation of laws and we will enforce those laws. Second, we need to deal with the people that are here, and we need to do that in a fresh and balanced way. As far as DACA, DACA only addresses about 10% of the illegal immigrant population. So what about the other 90%? You know, it might be interesting to some Republicans, but I actually support expanding DACA across the board. And what I mean by that is, under DACA, even though I believe the prior administration exceeded their executive rights, the president then made a promise to people. Those people paid money, they agreed to live a certain way, and they performed. I think there's an equitable reason to give these people an opportunity to a pathway to citizenship, and we need to address a fair and fresh approach. Thanks.
Thank you. Michelle, immigration, how would you deal with it?
Okay, well, first I think we all need to realize that this is a demagoguery tactic. This is basically blaming a group of people with no money and no power for big problems in this country. I don't think that building a wall. First of all, there's boats and tunnels and airplanes and human slingshots, and there's so many problems with this wall. There's just so it's a huge waste of money. I believe that we need more advocates. Why can't we pay people to meet these people, and bring them to a doctor and bring them to a lawyer and help them get in here? We've got plenty of money for wars and, plenty of money for jail, but we don't have enough money for advocates. I really think that we need to be looking at the root problem of immigration, and blaming people with no money and no power is not the way to go.
And finally, Doug Applegate, how would you approach this?
Well, first of all, the wall is just a pipe dream because Rocky and I both know that because Marines have been set down to the border before, you aren't going to be able to do anything as far as a wall. Drones aren't going to do it either. People always like to say drones are going to fix the problem. It won't. But here's one of the real keys that nobody's talked about. One, there's been a net negative immigration from Mexico for over 10 years. The Pew Center has already established that. So it's a wedge issue, and it's an issue that really doesn't exist. So what we have are dreamers that everybody here has agreed they deserve a path to citizenship. So it's simple. It's a DREAM Act with a pathway to citizenship. Nobody's really addressed the 11 million immigrants that aren't in a legal status in the United States but have been here. The first thing that we should look at is family values. Keep families together. Republicans and Democrats should be able to agree on that, and with that premise and basis, complete real immigration reform.
Okay, thank you. Well, the next question is about military spending, and since we have quite a few veterans here, this is an important question for this district. We have Camp Pendleton, part of the district. So the United States spends more on its military than any other country in the world, which does add to the deficit, and it also diverts funding for other very important programs that we need, like Medicare and benefits and health care. So would you support continuing to increase military spending. And Josh Hancock, you were beginning on this question.
I'm against the increase of military spending. Right now we spend over $900 billion on defense spending. It's the third biggest budgetary item behind Medicare and Social Security. And we just had tax cuts, which were great. They helped the middle class. But we need to cut spending to go with the tax cuts. Otherwise, we're going to have to they're going to have to add bigger taxes to rein in the deficit spending. And as a libertarian, I'm against taxes. I would never vote for a tax increase. And we need to cut spending as much as we can. And to do this, there's 177 U.S. bases worldwide. Do we need that many? Probably not. We could probably do with maybe 2/3 of those, maybe less. I think we could also quit giving enemies money as foreign aid. That's it.
Thank you. Mike.
Paul.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Mike, Paul. Paul, where do you stand on military spending?
Allison, in the most recent budget, we just passed a budget in which the president actually requested approximately $46 billion less than was allocated, and I think that's wrong. But if we're going to do that, we have to reallocate that money, and I'll give you one specific example. I'm the only enlisted veteran in this group, I believe. My mistake. I'm the only enlisted Democrat in this group. And as a result, after I got out of the service, I slipped through the cracks, and I spent the next 9 years working my way back out. And the problem is there's no transition. There's no assistance with the transition between military life and civilian life. I say no, but there is some. It's just not enough. We need to create a system where after an enlistment of, say, 4 years, you actually go to a facility where you're afforded options. Labor will assist with this and expose folks to labor. Education. Let's prepare our military men and women for civilian life and reallocate some of that military spending.
Thank you, Paul. So now we come to Mike. And Mike, you are not a veteran, I believe, but you have some connections to the military.
Well, I do. I've got certainly members of my family that have served, and I want us to have the best equipped and best trained military in the world. But I want to see a diplomacy-first military strategy. I don't want to put our men and women who serve in harm's way. And I believe if we're going to spend any more on the military, we need to be looking at what we pay our servicemen and women. Because when you look at what they are making, both enlisted and officers here, and you look at the quality of life of those right here at Camp Pendleton, we can do so much better. It is unconscionable to me that you have men and women right now at Camp Pendleton who cannot afford basic quality of life to the point where they have to go on the weekend to a soup kitchen. This should not be happening in our country. We have had a drinking water problem at Camp Pendleton, and as an environmental attorney, I am deeply concerned that we can't even fix our basic water infrastructure at Camp Pendleton. I want to see increased military spending for our troops who deserve it here as a better quality of life. That's where I'd start.
Thank you. And Brian Maryott, where do you stand on
Thank
military
you,
spending?
Allison. So, relative note, we don't actually spend more on our military unless you measure it by dollars. As a percentage of our GDP, a variety of communist countries spend more, certainly Russia and China, who are determined to match us and exceed us militarily. Our military's been engaged at some level for almost 20 years, going back to Kosovo and our Air Force. We have had a whole generation do some very thankless and very hard work. We've lost thousands of troops, and others have had their lives impacted. This is not a time where we can skimp on our military. Sadly, until the recent budget increases that were passed in our omnibus bill, we had we had General Mattis, who was having to choose between readiness, troop numbers, and training and career development for our soldiers. Our men and women, our brave men and women, when they get out, they want jobs. I think that's the biggest factor. We have 20 veterans a day committing suicide, and that's a terrible tragedy for our country. They're not all young and looking for work, but many of them are. And this is not a time to be skimping on our military. I think we should eliminate defense sequestration and restore defense earmarks in part.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you. I am lucky enough with my business to be serving military veterans every single day of my life. And I am, every day this question comes up and I talk to the veterans about this. And as most people here know, the military was devastated by the Obama administration, absolutely devastated, down to levels we haven't seen since World War I. This spending is absolutely necessary to return this nation to the greatest power on earth. If you remember during the Reagan administration, when he came to office, there was a hostage situation under Jimmy Carter. The moment that Reagan came into office, those hostages were released on the day he was inaugurated. We need to have strength through military, ladies and gentlemen. Evil understands strength. I also had the great pleasure to be at the inauguration, and the lady standing next to me, if she was telling me the truth, was in charge of the entire budget under General Mathis, and her word was, we can cut and be efficient if we'll just go into what we have and make more efficiencies. You can make drastic cuts to the military spending, but make it efficient.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Well, to use the metaphor of a large dog sitting in our living room, we need to have a strong military. We need to be militarily prepared. But we also need to respect the sovereignness of nation states. And we don't need to be invading every country where there's a conflict. I think we need to prioritize federal spending and have a national discussion about what's our highest priorities. We're polluting the air, and we have infrastructure that's crumbling. 70% of all violent deaths in the world occur due to murders. So I think we need a strong military, but I think our federal spending is out of whack.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Well, I love a strong military. This is Camp Pendleton. I would be honored to be the congressperson for Camp Pendleton. I have 3 Marine Corps wives that work for me, so it's a very personal thing for me. I would say the biggest problem we have is the dysfunctional budgetary process that we're going through, where these bloated budgets get thrown in these omnibus, and it's the sequestration axe hanging over everything that causes the problem for budgeting for our generals. And one of my friends in the Marine Corps had the honor of hearing General Mattis talk about how, as a Marine general, he could lose many, many lives in battle, but if he lost $1, he'd be held up for court-martial. This is a shame. So restoring budgetary soundness and planning is the key to this. The second thing that I would say is a very local thing. We have our bases, the Camp Pendleton is not individually metered, and we should not be making our families pay by block. It does terrible things for unit cohesion.
Okay, thank you. Joshua.
Yes, I started this forum telling you I believe in a very strong military. I also told you that I support President's national security strategy, and I do. And our national security strategy, a major point of it is a peace through strength. And what that means is we need a strong military in order to effectuate peace in our dealings with other nations. So I support our military. I would like them to remain fully funded, the largest and most powerful military on the globe, on this planet. And the only caveat to that is I would like to see value for those dollars. I would like to ask our military to cut where feasible any of the antiquated technologies that we don't need, and let's replace them with new technologies that bring real value. Thanks.
Danielle?
Okay, so first, I've got a lot of numbers for you here. $1.5 million per bomb times 26,171 that we dropped on Syria in 2016, $6.4 billion for 4 warships, $1.4 trillion for a jet that doesn't fly. We are currently bombing Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, Pakistan, and Somalia. That we went from 2 wars to 7 wars under Obama. I think our military spending is atrocious. I think that I would not vote for $1 more except in veterans, except in active duty military and the people. I am already against the next war, and I think that anybody in this district who is trying to support war really should be a no-go. I believe the citizens of this district, especially in Camp Pendleton, don't want to see any more ribbons on the doors.
Thank you. So now we have the two Marine colonels left, one Democrat, one Republican. So Doug Applegate, where do you stand on military spending?
Look at the number of veterans in Congress. It's constantly gone down. And look at the number of votes congressmen take to authorize military force. The problem with the budgeting process, both since Operation Iraqi Freedom and the war in Afghanistan, is it's been done on different books. And everybody in the military knows this. But nobody in Congress really knows how the military works because there's just a handful of veterans there. Veterans are going to vote in large numbers not to go to war, and also insist that the budgetary process gets connected. If you want to change that, don't send people who have never been in the military, who've never gone into a combat zone, and have no idea what's needed or not. We can't keep, this is a self-licking ice cream cone. If we send people that don't know what war is about, budgeting, and in reality and human costs, we'll continue to go down the wrong path.
Thank you. Rocky Chavez.
I like to present this from two positions that I hold. One, as stated earlier, as the Marine Colonel who served 28 years active duty service. And the second, as the chairman of the Governor's Military Council in the state of California to ensure that the Department of Defense stay in California. The short answer is, for the military spending, would you increase it? Yes. Because our military is underfunded, undertrained, and the young men and women are seeing themselves coming and going, and it's having a huge toll on their private lives. And we got to do better than that. But the second issue is the national security strategy. We need to look at this and say, where do we actually need to be in the world, and where do we need to use our military to influence it? Last week, China had one of their largest fleets go off the South China Sea. They have the ability to cut off the economy of the United States by hitting that choke point. There are serious issues we need to deal with, and we need to have somebody who's been there to understand it to protect our future and freedom.
Thank you very much. So we've come to the halfway point. We need to take a break. You're watching a special North County Roundtable program featuring candidates for California's 49th Congressional District. We're going to take a short break, and we'll return with more questions for the candidates.
For over 30 years, KOCT has been a community media resource. KOCT exists because of viewers like you who want and need to stay informed about their community. Only KOCT provides local election coverage and live airing of government meetings. Support this public service by making a tax-deductible donation today. It's easy. Go to KOCT.org, click on the donate button, make a monthly or a one-time donation. Help us help you stay informed about North County. Support your hometown television station today.
And welcome back to this special June primary edition of North County Roundtable. I'm your host, Alison St. John, and tonight we are featuring the candidates for the 49th Congressional District, being vacated by Darrell Issa. We're going to try to get to more questions this half hour by asking candidates to keep their responses to just 30 seconds. As a reminder, if one of the candidates is directly challenged by another, we'll give that candidate being challenged 15 seconds at the end of the round to give them a chance to respond. The candidates have been seated in alphabetical order, so we will start on this next round, and in fact it's Paul Kerr who's going to start. And this round is a little different. We're going to start with each candidate having an opportunity to ask one question of one other person on this panel. So you can choose who you ask it of and what your topic is. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, my question's for Rocky.
Surprise.
Rocky, I am deeply concerned about the fact that we have over 16 million people in this country who don't have access to insurance. Quality health care in my opinion, is a basic human right. Quality health care should not be a privilege of the wealthy. I stand for Medicare for all.
So now
the expansion of Medicare.
I'll have to lay a few more guidelines. So try to keep your question to within about 15 seconds.
My question, quite simply, is where do you stand with the expansion of Medicare to every man, woman, and child in this country?
Thank you for asking that, because when the Affordable Care Act was being discussed and we were talking about what we could do for our community, I was very clear that I would not eliminate the Affordable Care Act, I would just improve it. Because having been elected here in the North County and what we're doing in our clinics has really helped the quality of life for many people that I care about in the 49th Congressional District.
And how would you improve it in 10 seconds?
Pardon?
How?
Well, I think we need to look at the whole cost of pharmaceuticals. That's a big expense we need to look at. We need to also look at scope of practice for different doctors and ensure that, physician assistants and other people can deal with it. We need to look at the relationships between our clinics and hospitals. Want me to go on?
Sorry, there's the red light. I'll have to cut you short. Thank you so much. So, Mike, and maybe you should stick to 10 seconds for your question.
So my question is also for you, Rocky. You in the California legislature have a lifetime record with the National Rifle Association of an A and a lifetime record with the California League of Conservation Voters of an F. If you get elected to Congress, are you going to stand with the gun lobby and the big polluters, or are you going to stand for gun violence prevention and the environment?
I always find that interesting because I've never seen actually a rating from the NRA at all. But I want to be clear with the people out there in Oceanside. I am a strong supporter of the Constitution and the Second Amendment, and I will not waver from that. I think it's critical to the security of our country. And as far as the environment, you just need to look at and see who is the Republican out there talking about renewable energies and what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. So, Brian.
So, broadly, my question is for Mr. Applegate, Mr. Kerr, and Mr. Levin. I think I'll ask it of Mr. Levin because he seems the most combative around this, and he's my neighbor in San Juan Capistrano. I said that partisanship, I think, is really causing us to not be able to get things done in areas like healthcare and immigration. They're so critical. I've never seen it like this in my entire life. About 136,000 people voted for President Trump in this congressional district. And according to the LA Times, every Democrat candidate has vowed to impeach him upon arrival in DC, almost as though it's part of their platform. I would be interested to hear you explain to the 136,000 people that you would want to represent in Congress why.
Well, I think the first thing that the folks watching should know is that Brian and I live in the same community. In fact, most people wouldn't know this, but we actually go to the same church. Our families see one another in the community. I think that the 136,000 in this district that voted for President Trump, I think a lot of them are questioning their vote because they see an unprecedented level of corruption right now in this administration. And I think they want somebody in Washington who will hold this administration accountable. That's what any of the Democrats on this stage will do. That's what none of the Republicans will do.
Thank you. Craig, who would you like to ask a question of?
I was going to ask Rocky, but I've changed my mind. I'd like to ask Brian a question, fellow Republican. And really, it's just a question more for me, and I think it will help the listeners here. I've noticed, Brian, that you originally worked for a Democrat back in the day. And so for Republicans, and I'm really just asking because I don't know, how do you alleviate people's concerns that, that you're not a true conservative, that you may still hold a lot of those beliefs?
Sure.
Thank you.
So fair question. I'm the best kind of conservative Republican, the kind of conservative Republican that worked as a Democrat for a time and came to understand the failure of throwing money at every ill and thinking that was going to solve it. In my 20s, I worked as a chief of staff for a Democrat legislator in Massachusetts, and I was a registered Democrat for about 3 or 4 years, and I was a Republican by the end of my 20s and early in my 30s, and have been a comfortable Republican ever since. And I simply think that the Democrat Party has more failed strategies than successful strategies. When you have thought that way and believed that way and come around, so to speak, it makes you a better Republican. I would submit, just like President Reagan.
Okay, thank you. Robert, your turn.
This may be the most difficult question. a political moderate, and I am listening to people bash the ball back around between each other, and I think it's crazy to think that you're going to create compromise when you go into Congress talking about impeachment.
So who
But
would you like to ask?
I guess the question that keeps popping up into my head is for Doug. What the heck is a self-licking ice cream cone?
Want me to tell him?
I get the question.
Okay. It's a Marine term. Go ahead.
It is a Marine term, but let me give you an example of that in a congressional sense. It's the only job in the world, and I think Rocky's going to agree with this, where you can keep your job by getting exactly nothing done and keep repeating it over and over and over again.
Look at the camera.
You want to add to that, Rocky?
No, he did a great job.
Okay, good. It's nice to see the two front runners getting along so well.
We are the Marines.
That's right. Okay, so now Mike Schmidt, who would you like to ask?
It is a tough question, but one thing that struck me, and don't think I'm piling on, Rocky. I know you can take it. I know you do, brother. But it is a serious question. You were quoted, I think, in December 2015 in the Union Tribune when asked about would you vote for Donald Trump, and I think you said not even for dog catcher or something to that effect. How do you think that will translate in your ability to get President Trump to move into channels that you feel he needs to go into?
Well, I want to be really clear because I did say that. And let me tell you why I said it. I was watching this whole political discussion going through. I was very disappointed. And so I don't back off those words. But how would I work with him? The same way I work with Jerry Brown, as I mentioned earlier. I'm the chair of the Governor's Military Council signed by Jerry Brown, and I said some things about him too. So it's about getting things done and being a big person about it.
Okay, thank you. Joshua.
Yes, well, my question also for Rocky. Rocky, you are an establishment Republican. I appreciate your years of service, but I have a question for you based on your knowledge and your experience. Why do you think some of the other Republican candidates do not seem to want to show up to these events, and do you think that's going to impact their opportunity to win the election?
Actually, I don't think it's so much a Republicans. There's also some Democrats not here. If you're going to run for office, you need to take the time to talk to the people, and not just talk, but spend more time listening. And that's why I'm here. I think it's important to know what the people want and represent the 49th Congressional District. We're not running for president. We're running for in the legislative body, which is different than the executive.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Danielle.
Okay, this question is for Doug. So were roughly about 13 million people who left the Democratic Party at the end of 2016 because of the massive election fraud that was going on, and not by the Russians. Honestly, I made more memes in this election about Hillary Clinton than anybody in Russia did. So how do you still identify with the Democratic Party with all of the election fraud that they committed in the last election?
It's because I come from a working class family. And the first thing I'll admit is that Democrats have lost their way in talking with working class families. I still think there's a better hope that Democrats can recapture that ability, and that's why I'm still a Democrat.
Okay, so Doug, who would you like to ask a question?
No, this is real difficult. This is a serious question for me, and because I think people should understand who they're sending to Congress. So I don't know that I can ask a question of just one person, so let me try this. I think constituents need to know how people would vote on war. So I'll give you an easy example, what I think is an easy example. Is there anyone sitting at this table that would vote for the Iraq war?
Shall we just do yes, no?
Yes, no.
Go around, okay?
Because I'm a no.
Okay, you're a no, Rocky?
I was very vocal on that. I told my son no.
Okay, thank you.
No.
No.
No way.
Is this an Iraq war to come, or the one we're on Monday morning quarterbacking on?
I didn't think it was a Monday morning quarterback from where Rocky and I were sitting. So I'll give you an easy one.
It's very easy to say no with what we know now.
In retrospect, it's true, yeah. But you're a no.
I may be the only one. I would say yes.
Thank you.
No.
Having been to Iraq 3 times as a civilian, helping to clean up some of the mess on my own dime, I would say no.
Okay, thank you. Joshua?
Hindsight's 2020. I'd say no.
My answer is no, and I'm already against the next war too.
Okay, good. Well, that worked. Thank you. So, Rocky, do you have a question for somebody?
Yes, I'd like to ask Ms. St. John, what should be our policy with Israel?
That's a really good question. I think that when one side is throwing rocks and one side has a military, it's not war, it's genocide. And I believe that we need to call countries out when they do wrong things. And I don't see enough of that in Washington right now. I see a lot of people on both sides of the aisle in lockstep. They can't see anything that certain countries, including Israel, do as wrong.
Thank you. And Josh?
My question's for Mike Levin. You're very vocal on banning assault rifles. If you were to get an assault rifle ban, would you go after handguns next?
No, I think there's a huge difference, and it's very disingenuous to try to make a link between somebody that is defending themselves with a gun or someone that is hunting versus a weapon of war. I have 2 young children, ages 5 and 4, and every morning when I drop them off at school, I don't want their teachers to be armed. I want fewer weapons of war in our schools and communities.
Okay, thank you. So our next question, some of us have already addressed it a little bit, but this gives you all a chance to say for 30 seconds, talking about healthcare. Do you support healthcare for all, and how would you pursue policy changes if you were elected? Mike, I believe you're the first.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of a Medicare for all system. I feel that in this country, with the wealth that we have, it is absolutely unconscionable that so many millions of Americans have healthcare expenses that are literally pushing them into bankruptcy. And I know in those industrialized nations where we have enabled similar policies as Medicare for all, they have gotten better healthcare for less money. 95% of those in the 49th Congressional District would save money under a Medicare for all plan. This is the moral issue of our time, and we've got to get it right.
Thank you. And Brian?
Thank you. So this is probably the single biggest issue that's being impacted by partisanship at an extreme level, and it's impacting real families and real lives. We continue to talk in this country as though it's one or the other. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, we had a tremendous market-driven system that the folks who had insurance were very pleased with. The 17 million that did not, that was certainly a problem. But in an effort to resolve it, President Obama picked the whole thing up, shook it side by side, and dumped it out in little pieces. We now have a hybrid system between the two, and we can have the best of both so that everybody can have world-class health care. 90% of it driven by a market system that folks are paying for mostly privately, and alongside that, a system that gives people some public option with some peace of mind that comes with that.
Okay. I'd like to encourage people not to outline the problem, but more talk about how they would solve it. Craig?
Simple, market-based healthcare. It's got to go back to an open market. Take it away from the government, ladies and gentlemen. As far as the Medicare, Medicaid, we've got to negotiate the drug prices. It would be a huge savings. In a nutshell, that would solve our problem. Go to a market-based program.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
I would support expansion of Medicare if Medicare was first reformed. And I agree with a market-based approach. By lifting price controls on physicians and depositing your healthcare dollars into health savings accounts that were under your control, we would introduce free market forces, and you would scrutinize your healthcare bills, and by free market forces would optimize healthcare. And these health savings accounts, they would be your property. You could transfer them to your heirs in the event of your death, and you could convert them to cash, perhaps, in the event of your death.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you're a doctor. Where do you
Yes,
stand?
I pretty much agree with how he started, and I want to point out that all 4 of the Democrats are in favor of this. I've been doing a short video expose on my website, on my Facebook, and my Twitter. In fact, this week, I got banned from Twitter for presenting this, in my opinion. It's a very powerful thing. It's a Soviet-style takeover with Politburos running our healthcare. We need to have market forces. This goes back to 1994 when the Hillary Clinton tried to institute a lot of this stuff. We need to look what works. At the same time, we had Singapore. We have 4% of their GDP. They have better outcomes, longer lifespans, everything else. And I'll be doing a longer expose on my Facebook, as long as Twitter's dead.
Okay. Joshua, healthcare.
Yes, thank you for asking the question. You know, I would not support Medicare for all. I support the framework of our current system. I just think we need to reduce costs. I think we need to do things like giving advanced nurses full practice rights. I think we need to reduce government red tape to decrease the cost of access to healthcare, and we need to reduce the cost of healthcare itself.
And Danielle.
Okay, I'm not in favor of Medicare for all. I don't think it goes far enough. But what we do need to do is get the super morbidly obese middleman out, which is the insurance companies. This is basically our money pit. We have, you know, the CEOs of these companies are making millions and millions of dollars, and people are dying. I actually would support something more along the lines of like a TRICARE for all. A lot of you people are, you are, you know, veterans, so you understand how this system works. I believe that it's a more comprehensive system that we have in place right now that we can start using, or just cut out the insurance companies. The providers know how to do it, right?
Okay, thank you. Doug Applegate.
Everybody keeps saying a lot of us are veterans. There's 2 veterans sitting over here that have been on TRICARE for all of their lives, and they've seen how that system works. And I'm always surprised when doctors leave out the health insurance companies because they scream like bloody murder. I've represented them for years. You need a blend of a single-payer health care and Medicare for all. We have a lousy health care system. Nobody's willing to recognize it. The first thing they need to do is to change the way that we deal with Big Pharma and go heavily into biotechs who look for cures. Big Pharma doesn't want cures.
Okay, thank you. Rocky?
This is the big issue in this district. In this district right here, we have the best medical in the world. We also have a lot of people in lower income have no care at all. And that's the problem we have to have. I would support access for the lowest income because preventative models with young children is the best way to deal with this, especially when you're looking at issues of diabetes in the Latino community. So preventative model. And I also agree, we need to look at Big Pharma, we need to look at scope of practice, we need to look at partnerships between our hospitals and our clinics.
How do you differ from Doug Applegate in your approach?
Probably not a lot.
Probably not a lot. Thank you. Okay.
I always notice, though, you always give me the follow-on question. I've done that 5 times. Not that no one
Something
else
to
has
do
done
with
that.
being the front runner. And what can I say?
Okay, just want to make sure we understand.
Josh Hancock.
Okay. I support a free market solution with exceptions. You need to keep in pre-existing conditions. Because if you have, say, car insurance, and you have to be insured, so they could do that with health insurance also. We need to also get out the corporate cronyism. Insurance companies shouldn't be lobbying politicians to get their drugs approved or et cetera with that. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. And Paul Kerr.
Allison, when I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. She passed away 3 years later, but my family was almost pushing a bankruptcy because of this event. I couldn't be a stronger advocate for Medicare for all. And I believe my personal experience with this will allow me to work with the other legislators to bring them on board to make this happen. We've got to provide quality health care for every man, woman, and child in this country.
Okay, so I think we've completed that one, and we're moving on now to guns. And we've had some very tragic incidents in this country. I need to ask whether you have, if you've been in office, accepted money from the National Rifle Association. If you were elected, is that a body that you would accept money from? And very specifically, what would you do, if anything, to change the gun laws in this country? We'll start with you, Brian.
So we're not accepting any PAC money. And I think the Parkland shooting has really highlighted the horrible tragedy and the way our schools are vulnerable. I think our high schools in particular, with hundreds, sometimes thousands of students with drugs, bullying, hormones, high drama, it just seems to be they're particularly vulnerable. I think the low-hanging fruit is to have a couple of positions on each campus, not teachers, but folks who would be particularly well suited, or jobs would be particularly well suited for former military and former law enforcement, and to do a better job with the restrictions and the rules around mental health and communication with local agencies. And I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I believe that gun regulation belongs at the state level, and that's a factor as well.
Okay, so Craig, I'm sure you're a believer in the Second Amendment. Would you accept money from the NRA?
Absolutely. You're going to have to stop me because I'll keep going for 10 minutes. I am an NRA Life member. I'm a USCCA member. I'm a San Diego County Gun Owners member, and I just, by the grace of God and the sheriff's decision to politically open up concealed carry, I just received my concealed carry permit. The Lakeland situation was a failed liberal policy, folks. Look it up on the internet, and I don't have time to explain it, but it was a failed liberal policy. That's all there is to it. We need to have people in the schools with weapons to protect the kids.
So you would not make any changes?
No changes.
Yeah. Okay. Robert Pendleton.
I support our constitutional right to bear arms, but with reasonable limits. Stricter screening processing for the purchasing of firearms and a prohibition on military-style assault weapons are reasonable compromises. 70% of all violent deaths worldwide and in this country are due to murder, more than double the rate from wars. And a disturbing proportion of these deaths are due to automatic type weapons. Let's get these automatic weapons off our streets. Even children have got this thing figured out.
Thank you. Mike Schmidt.
I have not received any money from the NRA. I don't expect that they would. They are a lobby for the gun industry. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. In this state, we already have the strongest gun laws in the country. I don't think we need any more federal laws other than accelerating and making more efficient the background check process. In terms of accepting money, I would probably rather accept it from San Diego Gun Owners Association, because they look out for local San Diego gun rights issues.
Joshua, any changes you see necessary?
Well, I would first like to address the NRA question. I generally believe that representatives in Congress should not accept money from special interests, because I believe it brings an apparent conflict of interest in terms of how you vote in draft proposed legislation when you represent people. But in terms of gun issues, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I really enjoyed studying Justice Scalia's opinion in the Heller case. I fully support it. I think that was one of the most well-articulated positions the Supreme Court has held in terms of the majority of the Supreme Court.
Thank you. Can you wrap it up in 5 seconds?
Yes, I can wrap it up real quick. So no NRA money. I do support Second Amendment rights.
Thank you. Danielle.
I'm not a politician, so the NRA question's kind of moot. But this is something that we can rinse and repeat with almost any issue that we have. And it's money out of politics. For every one politician, there are 4 lobbyists. And I believe that this money has effectively insulated our politicians so that even if we wanted to pass laws, and we do, and we have passed laws, we can't even enforce them. We bring up Parkland because it was the latest tragedy. But what about Vegas? Does anybody know that there is a DOD employee that there's a warrant issued? They're actually that they're charging for this crime as well. There's more than one person. So really, I think that. And where did those guns come from? Where did these guns come from? I don't think that we can fully address this until we get money out of politics.
Thank you. Doug Applegate.
I'm not a thoughts and prayers guy. I'm tired of this happening. I'm not going to take any money from the NRA. The NRA is not being funded by its membership. It's being funded by weapons manufacturers. I believe that Rocky and I spent years training people to kill. It takes a lot of training. It's a psychotic episode, that isn't going to be prevented by background checks. I'm 100% for background checks. You need to bring these people out of the shadows. Make them go to training classes and combat ranges before they buy ammo. That is going to bring them out of the shadows.
So that's the main thing, is training.
Training.
Okay. Rocky Chavez.
I have never taken a penny from the NRA, and I don't plan on taking any pennies.
Have they offered it to you and you've rejected it?
No. That's what I'm saying. They never offer anything. So, and I have asked to meet with them a number of times in assembly, but I'm using my time. I believe in responsible gun ownership. I think people need to be, if you're going to have it, you need to take care of it. As we talked earlier, I agree with Doug on that. I have a bill going through California right now that's funding California to go after the thousands of criminals with guns who we've never gone after to take their guns away. We don't need to be taking guns from responsible gun owners. We already know who the people are who have guns that shouldn't have them, but California's chosen not to go after them. Let's get the criminals with the guns.
Okay, Josh Hancock.
All right. Being that I'm running a libertarian campaign, I would take money from the NRA because nobody else gives me any money. So, but it doesn't change my how I'd vote. I'd still vote the same way.
And that would be?
I'm pro Second Amendment. I work in armed security, former Marine veteran, or Marine veteran, not former. Good guys with guns are the only thing that stops bad guys with guns. I've done research on it. We need to keep our kids and our teachers safe, and so we need armed people in our schools to protect them.
Thank you. Paul Kerr.
Allison, I'm a gun owner and a supporter of the Second Amendment, but this insanity has got to stop. We need universal background checks without loopholes. We need to ban assault weapons and bump stocks. And the reciprocal concealed carry permit legislation pending has got to be killed. I don't want people coming to California with concealed weapons where the laws are so much lax in some other state and having those weapons on our streets here.
And Mike Levin.
Well, I agree that we need an assault weapons ban. We don't need weapons of war in our schools and our communities. We need universal background checks. We also need to fully fund research into gun violence from the Centers for Disease Control. And we need to stop concealed carry reciprocity. The gun laws of West Virginia do not need to apply here in San Diego. But I think more importantly, I won't take money or support from the NRA, but I think more importantly, we need to eliminate the political power of the NRA. There are too many in the Republican Party that are bought by the corporate gun lobby. Nothing will change until that stops.
Okay, shifting to another major threat to our society, which is, the question is, do you believe in climate change and that it's affected by man's activities? I believe we started with you before, right? So yes, it's you, Craig.
There's no question that the climate changes because that's the way the Creator made it. Any other reason is ridiculous. There's no science to support it. I do not believe in man-made climate change. I've read scientists who say that the amount of carbon we produce is equivalent to sneezing in a hurricane. So you can look at scientists that make up it's called fake news, who believe in climate change, and you can look at real scientists, and it's very simple. Climate change was created by the Almighty God.
Okay, so now, Robert, do you believe in climate change, and is there anything we can do about it?
Absolutely. I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in biochemistry. We should heed the warnings of our scientists. The geologists tell us that there have been 5 major mass distinctions on the Earth, and all of them, I believe, are due to abrupt changes in the climate, in the atmosphere. We are throwing carbon into our atmosphere at an unprecedented rate, and the temperature of the planet is rising. If there aren't enough, if crops won't grow in Illinois and in our agricultural center, we'll die of starvation.
Thank you. Climate change. Mike.
Well, we don't have time for a scientific discussion, but I'm prepared to engage in one. The question is what do we do about it? And you have people on this panel who believe that we should shackle ourselves with this cap and trade. My friend Rocky voted for some of this stuff as an assembly member, and the current cap and trade in California is costing us almost $1 a gallon, and it's being used for the crazy train to nowhere, and it's not even being used to reduce emissions, which I'm all in favor of. And we have another young man on here that is also earning a living, sucking that corporate money up for his clients.
Okay, thank you. Joshua Schoonover?
Yes, you know what? In terms of climate change, I believe it exists. I studied chemical physics. I studied solar system astrophysics. I know that there are cosmic events which affect the environment's evolution over time. I do not believe climate change is directly attributed to carbon emissions, and so I wouldn't support any legislation in terms of cap and trade.
Thank you. Danielle St. John.
The climate change issue we could definitely debate, but what we don't even need to. We can talk about fracking and what that's doing to our planet. That's, I mean, really, it's the science is behind that. This is destroying a lot of our, of land that could be usable, and now it's not. We are definitely having an impact on our topsoil, but the question that we really should be asking is that even if it's proven safe to take the oil out of our planet, we have renewable energy sources that do no damage. So I really don't think that it's an issue that should be even discussed. I think that we need to be moving towards renewable energies and moving away from taking it out of our planet.
Thank you. Doug Applegate.
The Navy, Marine Corps, the entire Department of Defense has been planning for climate change since the early 90s. And it's real, it's having an impact all over the world. And what we need to do is we have a glut of energy. Renewables can be competitive in less than 10 years. We need to stop spending subsidies to big oil and small oil to the tune of $60 billion a year and let the market drive us to renewables.
Rocky Chavez.
I know climate change is impacting us. And as Doug said, it's right. The military's been dealing with it for a while. As a chair of the Governor's Military Council, we're looking at sea level rises along our ports for the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Marines. It's a real issue that needs to be dealt with. And I'll wait for my other 15 minutes to rebut the cap and trade comment because I get another response, right?
Well, yes. Once we finish this round,
Okay.
I think you can have 15 seconds on that. Good, Josh.
Okay. I believe in climate change, just not man-made climate change. I don't believe that we don't put out enough stuff to change the environment. And I think it's just an excuse for more taxes. And as a libertarian, I'm against more taxes.
Thank you. Paul Kerr.
Look, I agree with the vast majority of scientists and military officials who've already concluded climate change is real. Now, Donald Trump believes that, and has said that he believes that there's a global warming hoax being perpetrated by the Chinese. And as a result, he used that for justification to cut the EPA budget by over 30% and appointed an administrator who's a known climate change denier. All of this needs to be reversed.
Okay, thank you. Mike Levin.
So for over a decade, I've been a clean energy advocate focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and this is a huge reason I'm running for Congress. I started our campaign by sending Darrell Issa the book, Climate Change for Beginners, because for 16 years he had denied the fundamental scientific consensus on climate. If we attack the climate crisis and create the clean energy jobs of the future, not only is it the right thing to do for our environment, but it is a huge economic opportunity for the residents of the 49th District. The biggest growing job right now is solar photovoltaic installer. We need to do in the nation what we've done in California.
All right. Brian Maryott.
Thank you. So we have 3 young children, and obviously I'm very concerned about a healthy environment for years to come. And I think there's some science we can't ignore. There's been science in the past. Catalytic converters came about, and there's been an answer to various things as we've taken science very seriously. But we have to keep in mind our friends and our families and our economy. We can't put whole communities out of business and out of work while others are building hundreds of coal plants around the world in the name of leading the way all the time. We have to do things with balance and respect for the competing needs.
Okay. So, Rocky Chavez, just to help fill in our listeners, you actually did compromise in Sacramento on cap and trade and voted with some other Republicans to help Governor Brown's cap and trade go through. So how would you like to respond to the accusation?
I want to be real clear. I didn't just help. I met, discussed, pushed through cap and trade to the Republicans because it's a market-based solution dealing with an environmental problem. It got rid of regulations, saved taxes, got rid of fees, saved jobs, defunded the high-speed rail, and saved us $18 billion in the industry. That's why the chamber, manufacturers, agriculture, dairymen, everybody involved in business knew it was the right decision. And you want to send a congressman who's willing to work for solutions.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time for questions. I wanted to ask about how you might help women's rights, but since there are so few women on this panel, it seemed an especially relevant question. There are some other women who are running for the Fit 49th, but none of them chose to come other than Danielle. So we've come to the point now where we're asking
One of them we
for...
look forward to meeting.
we will hopefully hear from... You can find out more about the other 5 candidates who did not show up if you do some research, but we're very grateful to all of you who did show up. We've come now to the point where you do a 30-second wrap and tell us why should we vote for you. And I think, Robert, it's you that gets to start.
Very good. Well, I'm a political moderate, and only moderates can truly compromise and unleash bipartisan gridlock. Congress needs reform. Congress needs term limits. Congress needs innovative ideas. And 50% of our congressmen should be congresswomen, which speaks to your issue there somewhat. Please vote for me, Dr. Robert Pendleton, for Congress on June 5th.
Thank you. Mike Schmidt.
Thank you, viewers, for spending some time with us. I would be honored if you would take a look at me for your next congressman. What we do not need are career politicians and far-left socialists, really, in Congress. We need somebody who has the guts to go in and the statesmanship to go in to the Republican and Democratic leadership and get things done. The biggest issue we have is healthcare. To send somebody who's not an expert from the bottom to the top in healthcare is folly.
Joshua.
Yes, I want to thank the viewers for tuning in. I want to thank my wife and my daughter who were unable to make it here today, but who fully support me running for this position. And I want to indicate to the people that I think it's time for a change. There are too many political opportunists and career politicians who are seeking this office. I think we need a fresh face and fresh ideas. One of those ideas I want to bring is term limits. I'm for congressional term limits. Please check out my website, www.joshuaschoonover.com. Thanks.
Thank you. Danielle St. John.
So I am running not because I want to, not because I want to be in the public eye. I'm running because I have to. I said at the beginning, I'm a product of this district, and I have seen it go downhill my whole life. And I have 2 children who have never known a world without war, who've never known an America without war. And so I think that what we really need to do to bring back to save our country is to end the 2-party duopoly. They are both sides are purchased. Both sides do not represent the people. And I think that I can bring the change that this country needs. I would like to invite you all to come out to a meet and greet on Sunday at 1 o'clock at McGee Park in Carlsbad.
Thank you, Danielle. Doug Applegate.
I've been running for this position for 3 years, and it's not under any particular cloak of a party. It's on the issues of healthcare, education, and clean energy, as well as stopping the use of military force. What we haven't talked about enough here is education. That is going to be the key to our future economy. With automation, robotics, it's going to change, and even preschool through 16 years will not be enough. We need to do what the military has recognized for a long time, as well as other corporations. That is continuous education throughout one's life, and that is going to jumpstart our economy.
Thank you. Rocky Chavez.
I'd like to thank you from all watching this show. Here's my message. Congress is not an entry-level position. You need to get somebody that can go up there and work with both sides of the aisle to represent you. Things I've done in Sacramento in the 6 years I've represented you. Career technical education is being funded across the state. Early childhood education is now a priority in the state. Adult education was saved by me pushing for it. Establishing the dashboard so you can see, a parent can see how well your schools are doing. The non-citizen jury, I fought to kill that, and the governor agreed with me, and he vetoed that bill. And here's the last one for all you vets. We are fighting right now so your retirement will not be taxed by the state of California. I get things done for you. I'd appreciate your support.
Thank you. Josh Hancock.
Okay. I'm Josh Hancock. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm not a career politician. I'm just trying to make a difference. I hope you vote for me. Visit my website at www.votejoshuahancock49th.us. Thank you.
And Paul Kerr.
Allison, Americans are struggling. It takes 2 incomes to survive in California. And more so than any other candidate in this race, I get it. I face those same struggles. In fact, I believe I'm the only candidate who can truly look you in the eye and say, I've been there. I know what you're going through. Folks, I believe we need to start electing a different kind of candidate, the kind of candidate that truly understands the struggles Americans are facing today. My name is Paul Kerr. I'm a proud Democrat, I'm a proud veteran, and I'd be honored by your support.
Thank you. Mike Levin.
Well, thank you all so much for watching. I am a proud Democrat that is running the fight for working people and to fight for the values that make California such an amazing place. I was born and raised in this district. I'm a proud resident. With my wife and 2 kids, we are doing everything we can to meet as many of you as possible. We've had 144 house parties over the last 14 months. We've knocked on over 10,000 doors. We've called over 100,000 people. We're going to return this seat to you. You deserve a member of Congress who's going to show up and who's going to listen, and I'll be that member of Congress. Thank you so much.
Brian Maryott.
Thank you, Allison. It's been a pleasure spending the evening with you. We hired a president who's a businessman, a results-oriented businessman, as I was for 25 years. We have been messing around with immigration reform, with healthcare reform, and locally we have no answers for San Onofre because politics has gotten in the way of all of this, and too often campaign politics. We have not gone through the legislative process on health care, and Americans are suffering for it. We have not gone through the legislative process on immigration reform, and Americans are suffering for it. And because they pulled the plug on Yucca Mountain, we may not have a long-term answer for our waste, and that's a local issue. We are getting killed by partisanship. I'll go to Washington, I'll get in committee, I'll work hard, and I will not be a part of that drama. Thank you.
And Craig Nordell.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this country was founded on the principles of God and the principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm the only candidate talking about it, and this is the main problem we have in our country, ladies and gentlemen. We need a candidate, and I am the only candidate here that I believe is a true fiscal and social conservative in the entire race. My favorite quote from George Washington is, "To the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian." George Washington. Please vote for me. I will stand by those principles in every vote I take. Nordall for Congress.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. I really appreciate the sincerity and the civility that you've brought to this forum tonight. And this brings this program to a close. Thank you to all of our candidates here for the 49th Congressional District who participated and for your willingness to serve. Please note that all the candidates were invited to this forum, but many chose not to participate in this KOCT forum. KOCT has for the past 34 years covered many of the issues and concerns of the 49th District, and we appreciate the candidates who appeared tonight to share their positions with local viewers and voters in the community on this community TV station in the heart of the 49th District. Thank you for watching this special edition of North County Roundtable. KOCT will also be playing programs featuring the candidates for the San Diego County Supervisors 5th District race and candidates for the 76th State Assembly race. All of these June primary election programs will be shown right up to the June election on Cox Cable in Oceanside, AT&T's UVerse service, countywide, and as on-demand video on our new website, koct.org. Be informed about your community by watching North County Roundtable. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
KOCT program underwriters are not affiliated with the City of Oceanside. This program is underwritten in part by Waste Management of North County in Oceanside. We are dedicated to serving customers and community as a safe, comprehensive service provider, a good corporate citizen, and a responsible environmental steward. Think green. Think Waste Management.